Morena everyone, ko Pip Woodward, tōku ingoa. It's wonderful to be here. I've managed to score a lapel mic, which makes it a lot easier. I've never been a karaoke singer and feel very awkward carrying a microphone. I'm from the beautiful Bay of Plenty, one of the deputy principals at Otamotai College. And I suppose importantly is a caveat here that yes, I'm a DP. We're doing some interesting things around wellbeing and resilience, but hey, we're learning lots. And I'm just sharing some of my experience, perhaps part of it as a DP, but also in the work prior to being a deputy principal at Otamotai College, I led a national contract with the ministry. Well, it was a ministry contract that focused on. Initially came out, because I'm a health and phys ed, it came out of the curriculum around suicide prevention, drug education, and it grew into a contract that looked at whole school wellbeing. And we were tasked, as if any of you have worked in contracts with the ministry, huge list of expectations about the impact of our actions and what we would achieve. I must say, there were some great successes. I worked with the 6 school support services, and I think it's really interesting when we talk about resilience. It's a word that's bandied around and used a lot, and we're articulating it a lot at the moment, and more so now perhaps with the release of the latest report out from Peter Gluckman, or the Professor Gluckman, around suicide. So I suppose just to frame that, I've got ideas, things we've tried. There are challenges. We're in a large school of 2,000 students. There are challenges with colleagues. So I'm just sharing some thoughts, some insights that I have, but I want to acknowledge the wealth of experience and knowledge that you also have in this room. So I think that that's really important. I'm not an expert. Okay. To start with, this is our Mauao, our beautiful mountain, and the entrance into Tauranga Harbour. Tua te rangi e tu ihu nei, tua te papa e takoto nei. Join sky above to earth below, just as people join together. There's a lovely story that goes with that. So today what I wanted to look at is really this notion, I did a little bit of research, quite a bit of research some time ago, for my thesis around complexity and change, and this notion of, if any of you have come across Jennifer Garvey-Berger, who work around adult developmental theory, and I got really excited about this notion of how we need to think and lead in different ways, and what that's meant for us in this notion of whole school wellbeing and resilience. So I'll just talk briefly about that. We've only got now about 45 minutes. Key ideas about the concept of resilience, the importance of nurturing and strengthening our own resilience, whole school wellbeing, and strategies that you might want to consider to support. So 45 minutes is a short time, but hey, we'll do what we can. So importantly, we see this is interesting. This has come out the Golden Circles, Simon Sinek. Okay, I think importantly, think about the why. So why is it that we're talking so much now about the importance of resilience and the importance of well-being? Because I'm talking about it from a whole school perspective. That's the well-being of all of us. So just turn to the person next to you and say, why do you think why are we talking about this at the moment? Have a chat. Okay, that's a short minute. Okay, anyone want to throw it out into the room? Why are we talking about, we've been talking about it, a lot of us are talking about it for a long time, and a lot of you will be too, but it seems to be quite topical, and I heard an interesting comment. Would I get you to share about people from the community? You were saying about rallying. Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of people out there wanting to come in and say, we can do stuff around wellbeing and resilience and things, Why else are we talking about it?
Because people acknowledge it's a problem now, whereas before it was like taboo. People didn't talk about it being an issue.
Yeah, we're talking a lot more about wellbeing. It's really exciting. And you all would have had copies of Eero's indicators of wellbeing. Yep, great to see. Sure, there's things we'll always debate, but I think it's exciting, and also the resource for success. So there's stuff out there which is really important, and of course the Eero report that they did in 2015 about wellbeing in schools. So Eero is sitting under there too, asking about wellbeing. And in the Coles, a lot of the achievement challenges are around student wellbeing, and hopefully they're also looking at whole school wellbeing. So it is really important. Anything else? We know the statistics. We know poor outcomes, and importantly, we know that when kids and we feel resilient and our mental health is great, we are far more engaged to learn. There is no doubt. It doesn't come afterwards, it becomes before. So our mental health and wellbeing is crucial. I'll let you read. What will education be like 40 years from now? I can't tell you, nobody can. But I can tell you that it must be totally different, because if it is the same as it is today, we're dead. Current approaches will be irrelevant, marginalised. The world will be different. You may want to be in the same, but may want it to be the same, but it can't be the same. So what does resilience mean to you? Think about that. Think about your resilience. Think about how you are and your positions, your experiences, because there is no doubt about it, as leaders in schools, we're tasked to bounce through the day, bounce through the term and the years with very many protective factors to try and help us bounce back. So what does resilience mean to you? Just talk to the person next to you, or if you haven't talked to the person behind you. Okay, anyone like to throw a word out or a definition they may have about resilience? I heard someone say bounce back. I have a ball here that I often use when I talk to students about resilience, and I talk to them about each one of these being a kind of like, protective factor. And the more protective factors we have, the greater, now check my phys ed skills, we can bounce. And so it's about building capabilities and strengths to help us navigate through life. So it is about this feature of bouncing back. Yep, anyone else like to throw a word? Oh, sorry.
I agree with you. It's the ability of us to bounce back and utilise, those key factors that allow us to get through the difficult moments.
Cool.
But in order to do that, be able to recognise those moments and then tap into.
Perfect. Awesome. Exactly. Because we all have different protective factors. There are some key ones. Now, the whare tapa whā out of our health and physical education curriculum is, I suppose, our foundation around well-being and this notion of having balance. So it's about, if we want to reflect on our own resilience, being physically active. It's about the ability to have social interaction. Our taha wairua is spirituality. What does that mean to us? What does that mean to school? What is the whole idea of taha whānau and connecting with our community, connecting with other people in the school? So that's the foundation of resilience and wellbeing for me. But what we know about research around resilience is there's some key things that need to happen. And you would have seen possibly this around. Life is like that. Life is a journey through. We don't know when it will end, but we know that we navigate around lots of ups and downs. And there are two really key things about resilience, and that is about our individual resilience which I'm sure you all are aware of, but also the importance of a supportive environment. And there is a kind of a tension there, a tension about there being a balance, because if we rescue ourselves or we rescue others too much, if we create too much of an easy ride, okay, we actually undermine individuals' capacity to be resilient, because you're blanketing them perhaps in too much safety. And so I think that that's really important, where, I know that Metro years ago did an article, I think it was called The Bubble Wrap Kids, or something like that. And it talked about overprotective parents and perhaps the community not allowing young people to navigate through the risks of living and trying new things. And so it is really important. And it's equally important that we don't want narcissistic people either. So this notion that we need each other. We need the community and we need to have our own protective factors. So that's a really important thing. The next thing to think about is this what research tells us. And the research has been around, a guy by the name of Norman Garmese way back in the 50s was really crucial perhaps in the work around resilience. And there is so much out there written about wellbeing and resilience. And I suppose for all of us, it's around having that understanding about what it is and what it isn't, and what works and what doesn't. So that critical lens. Importantly, it's essential for wellbeing. It's about a strength-based paradigm. And I'm going to get you to do a little activity in a minute about that. It's strengthened by environmental and protective factors, like we've talked about. It is a process, not a program. And I suppose that's coming back to, you cannot make someone resilient. You cannot teach someone to be resilient. But what you can do is create the culture, the environment, and you can create learning opportunities, very much like Mary Ann was talking about, that help around perseverance, around creativity. You can give them the opportunity to strengthen those protective factors. So be very wary of people that tout programs that are going to help your community be really resilient, because each one of your schools has its own culture, has its own climate, has its own community of learners, whether that be teachers, students, your whānau, your parents and community. So it's really important. It's about how you create space for people to build those protective factors. And all people have the potential to be resilient. And that is important, because sometimes we think that it's a trait. And there was a lot of banter around and challenge around resilience being something you are genetically born with. That's still being challenged about that theory, that actually it's environment. And also there are some traits and characteristics that you might be born with, like sociability, having great interpersonal skills, but we don't learn them, we learn them through living. Some characteristics we're born with, of course. It's about self-writing, and incredibly too, don't forget, it's dynamic and it's contextual. So for us, there'll be days that we feel very vulnerable and don't feel that resilience at all. Other days when we're just amazing, we just bounce and we're able to self-write really quickly. So it is when we lose someone very close, when we have a tragedy, of course we're not going to be feeling that resilient. Hence the notion of it being dynamic and contextual. There was a study, and what I want you to do is, I'll just whip back. I want you to think about someone that you know, because this research back here, when I talked about being strength-based, there was Emmy Werner and Ruth Smith. They did a huge longitudinal study, and that's where the Otago study is really exciting. The longitudinal study they're doing at the moment, that's been going for a great deal. It's 15, 16 years, I think. It's 50 years. 50 years. We've got a student in our school, which you most probably also have students, that are second generation, and they're going through the study now as well. So the longitudinal study is exploring some exciting things about all sorts, wellbeing. But the one that Emmy Werner and Ruth Smith did was one in the island of Kauai. And in the island of Kauai, they chose that island, and it was in the 50s because it was, of course, Pearl Harbor. There was a lot of bombing there, and there was a lot of deprivation as a result of what happened during World War II. And so high use of drugs, alcohol, family violence, poverty, the whole works. And so they followed this cohort of 700 babies. And they identified the ones that they thought were potentially at risk. And I think of that, it was a third of them. So about roughly 230. And what they discovered was they tracked them through life, and the study I think is still going. And they discovered that of all the third that they identified as having high risk and potentially poor outcomes, only 38 of them actually, sure, some of the others had difficulty in their 30s and stuff, but actually when they got to 40s and 50s, life was okay. Only 38 of that original really had poor outcomes. So it tipped this notion of risk focus to strength focus and the notion of looking at strength-based theory. Because the two things that were really obvious when they looked at the cohort that actually were at risk but did well, the two things they had was great social skills. So they had great interpersonal skills, and they knew how to get help. They knew how to seek support from others. So the people that could do that actually tracked really well. And they used the term of they worked well, loved well, hoped well, and played well. And it was, I'm giving a real short sort of snapshot of that research, but really interesting stuff. And so it made people think differently about strength-based versus risk. And so what I want you to think about right now, I want you to grab a piece of paper, and I want you to draw a T on that piece of paper. And if you don't have a piece of paper, maybe the person next to you does, and you could do it together. It's a capital T. Sorry, I didn't give that instruction very well. And I want you to think of someone that you're worried about. And someone, it might be a colleague, it might be a student, it might be your son or daughter, or it might be your partner, I don't know, someone in your world that you've got a bit of a worry about. And on the left-hand side, I want you to write down, don't worry, you're not going to share anything, just to write down some of the things that you are worried about that person. What are some of the things? Is it that perhaps they might be drinking too much? It might be that they don't seem to be able to relax. It might be that they're not able to finish tasks that they started. It might be that they're really stroppy. Okay, so some of the things, some of the characters, something about them that you're worried about. And write it down on the left-hand side. Okay, now what I want you to do, is on the right-hand side. I want you to write down all the things about that person that you think are really great. The things that you think help them.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, on the right-hand side, I want you to write down all the things that are potentially things you think are great attributes, are great protective factors, so things that are good, that they've got, that go well for them, for that person. Yep, on the right-hand side. Okay, what was easier to write? The left-hand side or the right-hand side? The left? Okay, and so I suppose the biggest challenge that for me and the space that I work in, and as DPs we work with a lot of young people, that's our business, and colleagues, is that we so easily flick to students, colleagues, things that aren't going well. Now I'm making a really big statement here, of course, and I acknowledge we're not all in that mindset, but predominantly we head to all the things that aren't going right. We talk about the risks, and sure, there are risks, but if we continue to look at things in a risk mindset, we see problems. We see students as problems, people as problems, but the problem is just the problem. How we flip to talk about strengths is a far more empowering model to grow resilience in somebody. Because if you talk about what they are good at, and you can do it this way, and if you talk about maybe reframing the questions you have to them. Hey, look, I've seen you do really well doing this. So on the right-hand side, you talk about some of those strengths that you've seen in them. Reframing that to use those strengths to help address some of the risks. Okay? So reframing that the conversation is empowerment, not about, oh, what a bugger. You seem to be really angry now. You know, how can we stop you being angry? Well, flip it, because possibly they might have a strength, a protective factor that's based on humour. They might have a really cool sense of humour. So, hey, you know when you get really angry and stuff, I know that in situations I've seen you use humour really well. How can you use that humour and that sense of fun when you're almost feeling like you want to, you know, let go? You know, and this is about adults as well. Okay, so if there's any one big strong message that I'd love to share with you and want to share with you is this notion of strength. Strength-based conversations focus on strengths. What we have is far more empowering than what we don't have. Yep, but that doesn't mean we ignore it, but we reframe it. I think that's really, really important. Now, there are a huge number of protective factors and risk factors. And I've put the protective factors up here, the individual ones and the environmental ones, because I just wanted you, they're not an exhaustive list, and I'm not suggesting you do a tick list, but just to have a look, as you look at these, what does that, ask yourself the question, what opportunities do you have and your colleagues and students to experience and grow some of these protective factors? I won't read them all, I'll let you go through them. So what opportunity do you have for yourself and the people you work with and the people you live with and love to grow these? Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yep. Yep. One I'm just going to mention, as teachers can't shut up for too long, is this notion of inner direction, internal locus of control. That is a really, if you're involved in having conversations with people about, that's a crazy question, you all do, but the notion of how people frame things. When people are able to talk about them having agency and them taking responsibility for things when they don't go right, it's called an internal locus of control. So if something happens, I reflect on it and go, okay, how could I have done that better? What did I learn from that? And how do I move on? Yep. Reflective people, being reflective is a strong protective factor. Yep. People that don't reflect have struggle because they don't learn the lesson, they keep repeating the same lesson and make the same mistakes. So reflection is a very strong protective factor. But this notion of internal locus of control versus external, an external locus of control is of course the absolute opposite. So when something goes wrong, it's a real indicator of someone's vulnerability actually when they start talking about it was everybody else's fault. And you often see it with young people when they're getting themselves into strife. It's everyone else's problem. And if we allow them to live in that space, there's limited opportunity for them to grow because they're not actually seeing what part they played in whatever happened and what they could do differently. So balance the internal versus external is really important. And wait, there's more. Okay, just a few other things. Think about those. Opportunities in your space for those things to grow. So if we want to think about how do we give opportunity for people to be reflective, and one of the key things about reflection is asking great questions. And I think that that's something that we have to work on, how we question and developing a repertoire of really great questions that help people reflect, okay, and what's been before and what are the possibilities. So the notion of reflection in our teaching and learning, in our work with our colleagues, in our own work, how are we creating that opportunity to be reflective? Okay, I'm not quite sure if you looked on Schoology, but I asked 3 questions about what makes you feel valued, collected and secure. And I find it really hard that we're in this kind of seating, and I was going to be courageous and make little circles, but I didn't have time. But if you're able to chat with a few people, what is really important to you about being valued, connected and secure at your place of work? So your school, what's important for you? You might just want to pick one of those. Might be around connected, might be valued or secure. What is important and what happens in your place for that? Go for it. Have a chat. So what are some of those things? obviously the conversation is rich because there's lots of rich things happening in your space about supporting each other to be value connected and secure. They are really cool, 3 cool things, to really, if you want to narrow it down, some really cool things to think about, value connected, secure. Because then you're going to ask about, so what does that mean for our students? What does that mean for our community? And what is our responsibility in creating opportunity for that? What I want you to do is, anyone want to share what they're doing? What makes them feel value connected, secure? Yeah.
Significant others in the school that are like-minded like me that help me be respectfully relentless in the job that I do.
Awesome, cool, great. So having that opportunity to be alongside people that you can be challenged by, but also have a strong relationship with. Yep. What structural things happen in your school to support being value connected and secure? Is there any kind of system stuff that happens?
Collaboration and co-construction of things.
Yep, co-construction of things. Yep. So working in collaboration. Yep. Hearing the voices, those quiet voices, creating opportunity, because those quiet voices are rich. They're very rich. Yep. Other things? Yep. Paul.
That co-construction again, I think particularly of the school vision.
Yes.
I think the thing that kind of unites, although staff have got different views on many things, I think the thing that really unites us and makes us as a staff feel included is a real commitment to the vision.
Yeah.
It's owned by the staff.
Yeah, cool. And the students. Awesome, cool. Okay, of course there is an equally exhaustive list of things around protective environments. I'll just pull out a couple of key ones there. Of course we know about the importance of high and realistic expectations. Clear boundaries. This is one that's really interesting. Clear, consistent boundaries are really important. That's not to say that the outcome is always the same. But it means that, and that's where, talking about change, we are living in the most complex time ever because change happens really rapidly. And I'm sure that you've watched yourselves, with the people that you work with and students, just how people are responding so differently to the rapidness of change. We know that the internet has and access to the global world has impacted on young people. And I know for a fact with us, I've got a group of Year 12 students running workshops with Year 11s around sexting. I wouldn't have imagined that would have happened when I was at Te Awamutu College. The fact that someone might have said, something quite, nice, but not like that, kind of a compliment or whatever, or something cheeky, but the explicitness and the what's being sent, okay, that's going to happen. But how do we support young people? So these students are supporting these people and creating this notion of, so what's consent, what are your rights and what are your responsibilities? So building capacity and capabilities for students to cope with that, because it's going to happen. Who would have thought, well, maybe I won't mention Trump, but who would have thought how we are now bombarded with the things that are happening beyond New Zealand and things we never thought we could predict. So we are in really volatile, unpredictable, complex and ambiguous times, thank you. Yeah, so that is how, and for me, that's why resilience is more important than ever. Because today will not be the same tomorrow. And that's just how it is. So we've got to ride with it, and roll with it and do the best and enjoy it. Importantly, enjoy it with limited collateral damage. Yep, because that's important. We all want to live long, good lives. So these protective factors are really important and within the environment. And I suppose it's how we create that as leaders, how we create the space in our schools. And I'm going to throw you up a big picture in a moment that's going to really layer it for you. But how we traditional rituals are really important. Really important, great rituals and customs. So if you've got rituals in your schools, they are really important. Okay. The other thing they're all important, but this one that's, if you're a grandparent, grandparents are really important protective factors for young people, for children. And so is, because left of field, having dinner at the table is a really strong protective factor. If you don't do that, because there is where we talk about our capabilities, things that have happened, how we cope, how we're learning, and what skills we have. So there are lots of things that we need to think about how we can reconnect. Okay, so those are important environmental protective factors. I'm going to flip through. Now, I just think that this is really important for you to think about. As leaders, you are watched constantly and observed in your day-to-day interactions. People, young people, community watch you. We sometimes don't realise that, but we need to remind ourselves. And so, importantly, discover your own resilience. We cannot teach what we don't know. When you have experienced your own ever-present resilience, then you're ready to implement strategies designed to tap resilience within students. So he's sitting on the deck, having a cigarette, and his upstairs is on fire. But, we have to look after that. That's important. So I want you to think about whole school, and we've just got 15 minutes. What are the structures and systems that exist within your school setting? So what are the structures and systems? Think about it. We'll just throw some out. What are some of them? The structures and systems. Timetabling's one.
You mean around resistance?
Around the whole school. So just the structures and systems that exist within your school. If you were to lift the lid off and see you've got a pastoral care system, you've got a timetable, those sorts of things. How about you? Yeah?
Peer support.
Yeah, peer support system.
Processes for teachers when things don't go right in classrooms.
Okay, so behaviour management plans. Or, a system to respond to maladaptive behaviour. Yep. Restorative practices. Other systems. Student leadership. Curriculum design. Advisory model. Deaning, pastoral, deaning, yep. Attendance. Yep. What other systems? Whānau support, consultation, different structures. I had a little bit of a tutu, and this might be a bit much to see, but those are just a few of the systems that exist in our space. You might be able to add lots of others. Reporting student success. So if we're talking about whole school wellbeing, if we just focus on one little area, that isn't whole school. So when we're thinking whole school, we have to think about all that we do in our school that promotes resilience and builds resilience within the community. So when I showed you all those environmental protective factors and individual protective factors, how are we ensuring that they are being grown and nurtured and identified in the structures and systems that exist in our school? And that's where it's really hard, because we might tutu with one little part of it, but then we find that we rub up against something else. And that's why it's really important. It's called systems thinking about all the systems that exist. So think about you might call it a strategic plan, we call it a strategic intent. Has your strategic plan got written in that? Is your vision about well-being? Is it about growing resilient learners? Is it about being committed and having a vision that nurtures all well-being for all? So think about that. Think about how your pastoral system, how does your pastoral system support the growth and use a strength-based model and provide opportunity to grow protective factors and grow the environmental protective factors? What about your student leadership? Do they have opportunity for empowerment? Do they have opportunity for altruism, for giving? Do they have opportunity to challenge? whānau and parents, so it's a really big job, wellbeing. And, like all of us, I can say there's still areas for us. We've still got lots and lots of work. If we want to frame the language around strength-based and talk about the well-being of the school community. Because there's some things in that system that can be detrimental or work against it. Yep. Cool. Okay, so the next thing. So where does systems thinking come here? And I suppose it comes into this notion, is that when we tutu with one thing, we forget that it impacts on everything else. So if we're wanting to bring in a new behaviour system, and yet it doesn't provide opportunity for students to learn from their mistake and move on, then what's going to happen here is the cogs are all going to get out of place and things are going to happen. And what if you take one out and put it in with another one? Is it still going to fit in? Because for us as leaders, we have to, I'm not sure if you've read any of the work of Ronald Heifeld's, he talks about the view from the balcony, is the ability to stand up and look over, not over in a sense of hierarchy, over but a vision, and to look at that and say, is the system working? Because I would argue, I know from my perspective at Otamutai College, we're really bad, we're guilty of pulling something there and changing it, and then it potentially upsets the balance of everything else. So we have to see it's the sum of the whole, not parts. And I find that is a really big challenge for us all. To think in systems. Okay, what I've put next to you is the power of resilience. And I'm mindful of the time that we have, but I want you to think about this system and all the different things that you have. And this kind of example came from Nan Henderson, Mike Milstein. They are two researchers who have done a lot about resilience. And they narrowed it down to 5 key areas. The piles are at the end of each row. And they talked about the notion that they divided it into 6 areas. So if you wanted to take something away with you, you might want to take this away and have a look at it. There might be some spares here. Oh, are there any spares in it? Oh, thank you. You might want to take it away and think about, okay, let's narrow down this resilience to 6 key areas. And those key areas being having clear, consistent boundaries, promoting or providing opportunity for meaningful participation, setting and communicating high expectations, providing care and support, teaching life skills, and increasing bonding. So you might want to think about what sorts of things are happening in your neck of the woods that are promoting those 6 key ideas. And then consider, of course, we need to consider some of the barriers, because barriers do stop us, or at least if we know what the barriers are, we're able to create strategies and space to mitigate them. Can't always get rid of them, but we could at least mitigate them. So you may want to take that away and think about that, and think about what could we do to strengthen the well-being of our school community. Does there anyone want to comment about that? Anyone want to?
Just the increased bonding?
Yeah. Anyone want to comment what they might think increased bonding might be? Okay, opportunity for connecting. Okay, so connecting with many different levels, whether it's how we create space for people to connect. So the word bonding means to connect and to interact. Yeah. Any other? Yep. So if you're here with a group of people, I'm not expecting that you'll go away now and over a coffee think about it, but maybe have a conversation if you're driving home. If you're driving back to Auckland or in the plane with someone that's in the same department as in your school, is having that conversation about, so what are we doing? Because the research that Mike Milstein and Nan Henderson have done identified those as some key areas that you could help build those environmental and those individual protective factors that produce greater outcomes for learners, which we all are. Yep, so you might want to have a go and think about that. Okay, so we're going to just finish off here. Again, I can't emphasise that enough. You might want to go away and think about your systems, because if you're working tirelessly at building wellbeing, you're wanting to increase positive outcomes for all learners. We're wanting to address this whole issue around disengagement, inequity, because we all have inequity in our schools, however that might be. By thinking about how we grow capacity and use a strength-based model, what difference we might do to the lives and potential future of everyone that we rub shoulders with, I think is really important to think about. Think about your school as a system. Think about as a big picture. For it to have impact, you need to consider everything. Because as I keep going, I want to keep saying, if we don't think in systems, we won't make the impact that we potentially can. Okay, we know that it's a sum of its parts. Okay, importantly, just to round off, prevention is key. And if you're aware of the World Health Organization model, they use the triangle. We use the triangle with our behaviour plan. The focus is on prevention. That's where we spend most of our time. Sure, there's going to have to be early intervention and targeted intervention, because we all experience poor mental health, and young people and colleagues need support. And so we need intervention and intense intervention. That's without a doubt. But if we can be really deliberate in prevention, we are going to make it a lot easier for ourselves. So focusing on prevention is the key. So again, looking at your systems, how are we preventing poor outcomes and how are we building resilience? Okay, research indicates that resilient students do well in school despite adversity, and that students thrive in an educational environment imbued with genuine care and concern from adults, and have high expectations for student success, and who promote student empowerment. So we know, and that's what I've just given you to take away if you want to have a go at looking at how you can do that. It's just a nice tight way of looking at impact, the measure of your impact around whole school wellbeing. There's heaps of research. I didn't include in this PowerPoint the list of research, but if people want that, okay, you're more than welcome to flick me an email and I can send you a research, a bibliography. But if you're wanting articles to read, there is a lot of work out there. What began as a quest to understand the extraordinary has revealed the power of the ordinary. Resilience does not come from rare and special qualities, but from the everyday magic of ordinary, normative human resources in the mind, brains and bodies of children, in their families and relationships, and in their communities. So thank you very much. 45 minutes, time for a cup of tea. Thank you I hope you've captured something from this presentation. Most importantly, reflect on your resilience, your well-being, because it's important to start with ourselves. Okay, so thank you very much.